Okay. Hi, everyone. So, together with my friend Kai today, we are super honored to be joined with Oliver, who is an EHL alumni, which is the number one hospitality school in the world based in Switzerland. But what's interesting is that he is not only good in hospitality and business, but also coding. So, from hotel management trainees, catering services intern, to now a self taught software engineer and currently working at StackSync, which is a data synchronization startup coming from YC batch of 2024. And I think, as most of us are aware, getting into any early stage startup is super, super hard, and it's potentially harder than Google or Apple. And what's even crazier is that he's also a founder of multiple startups, including Kerno, which is a business operating system for European SMEs, and a learning and tutoring platform, StudyBud. And there's so much more to the story, and we will talk through them one by one today. So, welcome, Oliver. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for
And
having me, guys. It's
yeah,
it's really cool.
and before we talk about your achievements, could you do a short self-introduction for us?
Sure. I'm Oliviero. I'm Italian and Swiss. I have now been doing coding, software development, software engineering for a while now. Although my resume might say otherwise. And at the same time, as you just said, I graduated actually just last week from EHL Hospitality Business School. And yeah, currently working at StackSync, so leading the workflows development. I'm basically working as a founding engineer on the workflows product of StackSync, which we can go later deeper into if you guys want. And yes, that's pretty much it. And on the side, I like to cook. I like to make good spritz, and enjoy the life.
Nice. Okay, so for today's interview, it's segmented into three parts. So the first part, we're going to talk about Oliver's journey to becoming a self-taught software engineer and his life at EHL. Then we're going to talk about the three startups that he's currently involved in, and finally, we are going to gain some advice from him. And for the audience, for or students, listening to this podcast, if you're someone who is also exploring the world of tech and self-learning, this episode will be for you. So yeah, let's start from the very beginning. So how did you manage to do this from international business to and
Yeah,
hospitality to now a YC software engineer?
this is a question I get very often. So actually, it started out because I started already in high school. Basically, in high school, we had the C++ course, which is what initially got me interested in tech. And actually, from there on, it's actually the moment where we could say I started actually. So to be fair, I've been doing this for a while, even though I then decided not to take a traditional path, let's say to computer science. One of the reasons actually I decided to study at EHL was because I think that actually what makes good technical products is not just the engineering side of it, but also your understanding of the customers, right? And the thing is, we always have, this kind of stereotype of, the engineer in his cave, who codes up something, with, no external advice or external feedback as to, what should actually be in the product, right? And I think this is kind of one of the things that I was also interested in business, of course. So, of course, all of the classical business subjects. But I think more than that, I was interested in understanding really how to speak to customers in such a way that would allow me to build really strong products. And at the same time, of course, gain business skills and kind of, become more well-rounded, let's say, in this world. Although, of course, I didn't know startups back then when I started out. So it kind of came all in together somewhat conveniently, let's say so. Yeah.
And I guess to follow up on that, so you started the business school wanting to learn how to talk to customers, not knowing that you would want to start a startup. So what was
Correct.
the, what was how did you have this
Well,
idea even in
well,
the
my
start?
my mother was in the hospitality business, and basically we were looking at several business schools at the time. I was still actually I was always coding actually, and I mean doing small projects here and there and learning about software engineering and so on. And then we stumbled across EHL, and EHL of course has very big reputation in the field. It's I think still top first hospitality business school in the world. And I think even top 5 in management in Switzerland. And it struck me because compared to other business schools, it really had this focus on talking to customers, understanding customers. So everything basically relate kind of the skills that bring you to doing very good product management in the end. So I thought to myself, well, that seems a pretty good deal, and it paid well in the end. So that was kind of the reasoning back then. But yeah.
And from this experience of business, and also saw on your LinkedIn that you were
Hmm.
involved in a lot of internships that were relevant with the hospitality
Yes.
business. How do you think this experience, made you stand out as a engineer, or let's say applying to jobs or talking to customers?
Yeah. I mean, well, hospitality business is like it's all about this, right? So I worked initially in 2 hotels, I think, and well, while it's not directly related to what I do today, right, in by any measure, but it was very interesting because you kind of learn a lot about empathy, about how to talk to people, about their needs, and you also learn a lot about cultures, right? For example, I remember this one time that I was working at this hotel, and we had a Japanese customer, and I think they asked him, well, how was your experience, with the product, with the hotel, with everything, and we learned later on that actually Japanese customers are always exceedingly polite. So they will always say, "Oh no, everything was amazing," but then they might go behind and actually give a bad review. So these are some of the things which I think are very interesting about being being and talking to customers, and kind of gaining a more, let's say, polished understanding, right, of what is product. Um, I mean, at StackSync, where I work right now, actually the CEO Ruben, who actually was creating the product initially, he also actually had quite a similar path to me. He also studied business first, and then later got deep into tech. So I think and it shows in the quality of the product, right? So I think that's an interesting path, yeah.
And I can see that, like, you definitely know how to talk.
You guys are
And
too
yeah,
kind. You guys are too kind. You guys are good interviewers. You ask the right questions, so that's it plays well together.
Yeah, and
thank you so much.
regarding that, then, so since you take the business route, then how would
Hmm.
you consider like the things that maybe you wouldn't be able to learn from a computer science degree? How would you assess the not
I
having
mean,
that
well,
experience?
all right. Well, there's a certain amount of of course, business skills, right? So everything which goes, into managing a company, accounting, statistics, all of this kind of stuff, which is classical business. I think what's important, what really made EHL really pivotal compared to other business schools, is that we're basically pushed at every course to present in front of an audience. So even for like the smallest, stupidest project, we present it, and we are also graded on our presentation skills. So that's part of the grading system. So people are relatively motivated to do well on that part too. And yeah, and furthermore, there's tons of opportunities for stuff to do at EHL. There's also a public speaking committee, right? And there's also I think in the first year there's also a prep that you do, where they tell you, right? So we always see this thing at EHL. There's no second chance to make a good first impression, right? And so I think that kind of, they say it at the beginning, and perhaps it doesn't register immediately, but over time, it's like, oh, it has an effect on you. And so, yeah, I think these are some of the skills that are most important from a business degree. Then, of course, right, yeah, I mean, you get all of these business skills, which are kind of, you can also learn them by yourself, right? Certainly. You can learn sales by yourself, of course. But I think the real key skill is talking to people.
And how did you master software engineering? Because did you follow any specific course, lead code, internships?
Well,
Is there a secret recipe?
sure. So, well, I love the question actually. I've thought a lot about it, right? So the way I started is like everybody, right? I started looking up some courses, and then you go online, you go on Udacity, and there are these mega courses. Oh yeah, this 48-hour course, and you're a master full stack software engineer, right? Like nothing furthest from the truth, right? And the other point is also that with videos, you learn very slowly, and you actually do not really learn because you sit there, you watch some video of some guy who for 12 hours codes some crazy solution, and at the end you think, well, now I can do that, right? And then you go in front of a terminal and you're just completely stuck, right? And the reason for that is because coding can become very applied, right? So you need to have this application yourself. So actually, what I recommend, and I've actually already mentored a couple of people, and helped them kind of get into the field, and the path which kind of seems to be working with the people I mentor is that I usually say, look, aside from a programming language, any, I usually should suggest Python because it's so transversal in its many applications. And then you start building some very small projects, right? So figure out how to do a to-do app, right? And here there's many things you can do. For example, you can use Streamlit, which is a very big framework which allows you to, basically completely abstract the front end in a couple of lines of code, right? So you don't really need to think about front end in that moment. And also how to use a Postgres database, how to do connections, how to actually build software that scales, how do you manage serverless infrastructure, right? So I kind of take the approach of going very much from backend because I think that actually backend architecture and being able to design good backend systems is actually the vast majority of the value of a company. I mean, front end is relatively easy to reproduce, and actually it's really the way you handle the data that kind of makes a difference in a company. So I try to focus on that first with people I mentor, and usually what I would do is that they would build a project, and then I would look at it, I would completely dismount it in its every form, and I would tell them to do it again. And then 1 week later they come back and they have to do it again, until basically they know Python like masters. They know the ins and outs. They know how to build good and scalable APIs, how to make clean code, how to make tests, and all of these kinds of stuff. And after I say, okay, now enough Python. So this is often a bit frustrating because now you're a master at that, and now I take you off your comfort zone, and you go on something like JavaScript, Go, or another programming language. Usually, I kind of tend to go for something a bit more front end, so you can also learn that side and how to make the two communicate. And then you go on JavaScript and you do exactly the same. I usually suggest to learn always a bit of documentation. So I would usually give a bit of written documentation, which you can read in a couple of hours. Maybe not the full thing, but somewhat of a shortened version. And then I would give them a project in that programming language doing exactly the same. So rinse and repeat, basically. And then the master project, right, which I usually give is building something using something hosted serverless, so Docker with a couple of microservices, involving 2 or more programming languages, where you have to do strong typing, where you probably have to use probably even a bit of machine learning, perhaps have a little fine-tuned model, or perhaps even do some data manipulation, use some data warehouses, Snowflake, Postgres, make some some RAG, retrieval augmented generation, fine-tune a model, right? So do a bunch of stuff and really create a very complex case altogether. And be able also to do the whole deployment pipeline. Very often people just say, I'm going to deploy to Vercel, but then they don't actually know what's going on behind there. So while I do love Vercel as a product, but I think it's good to learn how to do stuff the old-fashioned way at the beginning, and then you can use all of these these
So
products.
how does this iteration cycle, how long does it usually take, do you think, for people if they are
Oh well,
self-disciplined to
oh, you know,
actually implement them?
it requires a lot of discipline and passion, right? I mean, it's certainly not the nice boot camp, right, where you go and they give you a couple of nice exercises, and there's even it's the hardcore version of that, right? Um, I would say probably if you do it very focused, anywhere from 4 to 8, 12 months. I don't know. It's extremely variable, and people learn at different speeds, right? For some people, Python is obvious and JavaScript is not, or vice versa, right? So it takes, I would say, at least a year for you to be somewhat comfortable with what you're doing. But I've seen people go faster, and I've seen people go slower, right? And also, like, people have different commitments, right? Some of them are in school, so there's a bit of that, and yeah. But then I think what's important is to continue learn, right? I mean, when I kind of this was kind of my path, right? And then now of course I've learned also quite a bit also about some other low level programming language, and a bunch of other topics which I think kind of make you, say, not just a software engineer but maybe a more broad computer scientist as a whole, right? So yeah, and I think somewhat my EHI education somewhat played into that in some measure.
Oh,
And when you were
yeah,
first
wait, go ahead.
when you were
One at a
first
time.
learning software engineering, um, I'm really curious, what was the first thing that you did, like a project, or, what was the first thing
Mm,
that you did when you
so
think that you have gained in sufficient knowledge in software engineering?
Well, I probably still have the GitHub repo. Oh, sorry, you mean like project that told me that I have enough knowledge, you mean?
So basically, the beginning of the learning path is basically, you have to do a lot of practice, and yeah, but there's, you know when you reach a certain point, you will have gained, um I say, sufficient knowledge for you to do something big. And I
Yeah.
wanted to ask, what is the first big thing that you decided to do with all the knowledge you have?
I think the first big thing that I did, I think, was StudyBud. So I think it provides a good jump start to this topic. So StudyBud
So
was
not the system manager for the hotel.
come again?
I remember you built the online system for the hotel.
Oh yes, well yeah. So yeah, for there's this hotel in Italy for which I've worked, which I got to know when I was younger.
Oh.
And actually, I still do basically some contract work with them, as, let's say, a on contract IT manager, if you want. So yeah, one of the first things I did with them too, actually, I built basically a small property management system for the hotel, and basically because hotels have a lot of operations and they have a lot of data coming from channel manager and then booking manager and then booking.com and then, like, a lot of different sources. And so basically I built first, I think it was an orchestrator. So basically you would have like a central hub with a queue, which would get all of the data from these different sources and then connect it together through some integrations, which now I don't remember how it worked, but it worked eventually. And then basically there was a very simple UI back then. I was not focusing too much on the front end. And basically was very good because they could basically see all of the reservations. They could do all of this stuff, right? Integrate it. I think I built some integrations also with Google Sheets, which they were using back then. So yeah, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff. Yeah, I think this was a great first project I did, which kind of taught me also how to work in a production environment, and I was also treating a customer database, right? So back then, and yeah, you got to be careful with that stuff because of course you have a lot of liability there. You can mess up a lot of data. Yeah, so I think it's very important to learn how to build somewhat enterprise grade features, right? And this is something like we hear a lot, but really it means, being able to, well, of course, be compliant, of course, to all the certifications and the things, but also, making sure you treat the data correctly, you do very strong encryption, and you build strong and scalable APIs, right? So I think this makes for extremely enterprise software. Yeah.
And how would that someone teach themselves something that's, enterprise and robust that are often not found on the internet, or how did you go
Well,
about
I mean,
collecting?
I well, as StackSync, we see a lot of this, right? So StackSync works basically in data, in everything which is busy building data pipelines for enterprise customers. And we have to go through a lot of compliance, and we're really super careful about how we treat data, and we have really strong policies in place. So I think that's the first thing that you got to do. Beyond that, of course, there's a couple of basic skills. I think this is maybe the sector where it's interesting to have a certificate, right? Because there's a certain amount of skills about the way you do encryption, rotating keys, basics of cybersecurity, this kind of stuff, which I think is relatively useful. And it's not so easy to get to on your own, when you're just building a little project. And when you're building a lot of project, also you don't think about all of this stuff, right? So I think this is probably the one area where I would recommend getting a course if you can. I think there's very good ones from AWS, Google, that you can get. So I think that's pretty good. Yeah.
All right.
And
Thank you.
I have one last question.
Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
like
No.
you mentor people in these fields, and with a lot of AI, so how would you suggest them balance their learning with some good use of AI? Maybe there's some good cases where it's better for them to use AI, maybe not. What's
So
your thought on those?
So that's somewhat of a touchy topic in some sense, because there's a lot of engineers who strongly feel that using stuff like Cursor basically means that you're cheating and you're not really learning, and there's a lot of this, right? And these are typically the low level backend programmers, right? Now, I don't really agree with that. I think that AI is a great tool. It helped me to learn a lot of things, and I've seen it help people learn a lot of things. The thing is, you don't necessarily need to remember all the methods, all the string methods of Python, right? That does not really help you in any significant way, right? What I would suggest not using AI for is everything which relates to designing algorithms, right? Thinking critically about data structures, and really any type of critical thought that is not a couple of lines of code, right? Because I mean, a couple of lines of code, anybody with sufficient knowledge of the syntax can get to it. But really designing, big, scalable, extremely generic, right? Because what we miss in designing software is that often we don't think about use cases. But when I design software, I kind of think like, okay, can I take this software and put it in another industry? And is it going to work, right? Or could any other company take over my software, plug in the data, and will it work, right? And making code also that is extremely data driven and not code driven also helps with this. So being strongly reliant on JSON and kind of data structures to do most of your heavy lift, I think is actually key to making great software.
Actually, I think one question I might have missed is how much time are you spending every day, just learning new things, even right now?
Mhm. Well, I mean, that would be, I guess, a bit difficult to quantify because even as I code and I make new features, it comes up. Usually in the evening, I watch. I sometimes watch for entertainment, or I have a couple of newsletters which I read. I think I spend probably half an hour to an hour per day. I mean, of course, it's not everything pure knowledge. It's a mix usually. Sometimes I read some papers which are interesting, especially about ML, right? I mean, that's the new papers which are coming out recently are kind of crazy. So those I find extremely interesting. There's a couple of newsletters that I follow. I read some stuff from maybe the new releases of certain libraries. I think they just yesterday they released the new version of Bun. This JavaScript runtime, which is doing some pretty cool stuff to increase dramatically the speed of JavaScript runtime. So that's that. Yeah, I would say half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour per day, perhaps. Yeah, something like
That's
that.
really impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
basically you're keeping yourself up to date. And you know, I've heard a lot of software engineers, they talk about this thing called JavaScript fatigue, where basically there's a bunch of things, new libraries coming in, and they have to be
Yeah,
released every day. And it's really impressive to not get tired of this.
yeah.
Have you ever got tired of this?
Well, I mean, right. I kind of try to filter the stuff I read, right? I mean, if it's another JavaScript framework for web programming, well, I think that's all right, right? I mean, Next.js does it for me. I don't really need to go deeper than that on this topic, right? If I go deeper, is it's more on, you know, stuff that is kind of new, right? Not let's say I try to learn about kind of new something that is kind of disruptive, not incremental innovations, right? Unless I'm trying to make some new feature. I mean, yesterday I read about Bun for JavaScript just because we are looking into making at StackSync some services even faster with JavaScript. So for that case, it has an interest, but otherwise, I mean, reading about every single framework, I think it's just could be just a waste of time, right? So yeah, you kind of have to filter a bit according also to your interest, right? I'm mostly interested in everything which is backend, front end, machine learning, this kinds of stuff I'm interested in. But then if you're interested in, say, embedded systems, well, it's probably what you should read about, right?
Yeah, so I guess to sum up what your experience kind of looked like, it's basically you went to business school to learn about how to talk to people, but on the side, you learn how to self-taught yourself programming by actually building small projects and breaking it down and add features,
Exactly.
and then building up to a level, and then completely start in a new programming language and do the same.
Yeah,
So, so,
exactly. Yeah, that sounds
so you
about
would
right.
suggest that would be the kind of the approach
I,
that
I
you
think
think.
I think that's a great approach, right? And it's extremely hands-on. Yeah, I have to of course say I also learned a bit of theory, right? I mean, I kind of
Mhm.
made my own mini bachelor's by also
Mm.
doing a bunch of theoretical stuff. I did some courses from Stanford online, or I think from Georgia Institute of Technology, stuff specific to machine learning, stuff about algebra, mathematics. These are kind of useful if you want to understand machine learning a bit better.
Mm.
So I kind of went deep into this. Also, another course which I think everybody should take is data structures and algorithms.
Mm.
Of course, if you're a CS student, you will have to take this, right? But if you're not studying necessarily CS, I think it's great. It's great. Probably
Cool.
one of the most
Then
important courses, I would say. Yeah.
cool. Then
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
recommend everyone listening to us. So I'll let Anderson
Definitely.
take it away for the second part when we explore the startups that you're involved in.
Exactly. Yes. So I guess the first ever startup, because is your first one,
Hmm.
StudyBud. We're really interested in this one. It's kind of like a compilation of, you know, all the knowledge, and you're just condensing your knowledge into an application. 500 students, 800 hours of lessons, managing
Yeah.
team of seven. What is the story like?
So great introduction. So well, the story is the following. So I started in the first year of EHL actually. I kind of started listening a little bit about startups. I back before that I knew actually pretty much nothing, right? So I started reading about Y Combinator, you know, and all of these kinds of stuff, and then I was around, and I was always giving basically math repetitions in math at EHL and a couple of other schools. And then I thought to myself, well, is there perhaps a way we can build a product around this, you know, and kind of make it more fungible, more accessible, right, for all the people at these schools, right? And then a couple of people came up to me also and started telling me, you know, it takes me so much time every time we have to agree on a place, on a time, and the last time I thought it was gonna be in person, while we were actually online, and you know, all of these kind of complications. And so that kind of sparked the idea initially for what was StudyBud, which well back then had a different name. And so the idea was to basically create a marketplace where you can get, of course, tutoring products, basically. So tutoring products include everything from one-to-one lessons, group lessons, e-learning materials. So for example, if somebody records a course or creates notes, which was indeed something that they really loved. Um, and and so then I thought about this product, and we launched, I think, the first version of this, which was a very scrappy MVP. Had a very basic UI actually, where you can go and basically select a tutor. And also the specialty of the platform is that we would basically have the specific subjects of each and every university customized even for each and every course. So basically, you would have somebody who did your same exam the last semester with the same course, with the same professor. So somebody who knows extremely well what you're talking about, right? And give you specific advice to nail that one subject. And this kind of provided a kind of a competitive advantage to what we had in other tutoring platforms and products, because many of the other ones were very unpersonalized, were just, generic maths, right? But maths is kind of taught differently at every school and to varying degrees of difficulty. So this was a key differentiator, and basically we started. I think we got 20 users in our first 2 weeks. Then I said, oh well, this seems interesting. So I started investing a bit more into it. We kind of grew the platform a bit more. I took on also a couple of people, some of which were just my friends who came on to help with. And we ran it for about, I think, a year. We continued still to run it today, but we ran it really intensively for about 2 years for the first version of the product. After that, actually, throughout my studies at EHL, there is a mandatory internship that you have to do in the middle of the studies. And I actually managed to do it at the Innovation Hub of EHL, which there is, and do it basically as my own boss, which was great. So it was fairly cool because I could basically, while all of my friends were in internship in these banks or these other companies, I was basically my own boss, and it was pretty cool. And I even hired a couple of people to work with me. So that was great. And we continue to grow, and actually it's still operating now. In the last year, we had a bit of decline in demand because, well, several factors going on. But yeah, and I think we're planning something new for that too coming soon.
And what is your advice on managing such a large number of, I mean, it's not really a large team, but for a startup, it's 7 people. It's quite a lot. How do you manage
Yeah,
this team,
yeah. Well,
and what do you look for in a founding team member?
I think back then I did also a lot of mistakes in hiring, right? I was 18 or 19, so of course it was my first time hiring. I think what's important to look for is not so much the skills you have. I mean, we hired a couple of engineers, and at the beginning I was looking at the wrong things. Meaning, I was looking that they had experience as senior engineer in some company, they had some fancy degree or I don't know what, right? All this kind of stuff, and it was really the wrong approach actually, because what's most important is actually the motivation of people, how strongly they want to learn something, and that makes the whole difference really. I've had engineers which were on paper much less experienced, and yet they proved to be star members within months of joining. So that was the proof to me that grit, motivation, and also of course willingness to grind. And I mean, that's startup hours. So of course we 60 hours a week was kind of a minimum that we would put in, right? So that was kind of implied, and yeah. So and that was true with all team members, and I'm in contact with most of the team members still, even those who are not there anymore, and so yeah.
And
So
were the
this,
team mostly in person, or did you have to also manage the working
well,
across? Yeah.
I mean, I mean, the team is still there, right? We are kind of a bit divided. There are somebody in Italy. Some of us are in Switzerland. I'm in Switzerland currently. Yeah, it's kind of some of them are from EHL, some of them are from some other schools. So it's kind of divided across. Um, yeah, we do a bit of mix of person and remote, and I think it works pretty well. Many companies, for example, Supabase, Y Combinator, S20 batch, they're fully remote from what I know. So, and it seems to be working pretty well. So, but I do appreciate though being in person with people, and I think it kind of gives you the opportunity to bond more, to be a bit more involved. But you can make it work remote, I think. Yeah.
That's pretty inspiring. Well,
Thank you,
let's talk
guys.
about Kerno. What is
Yes.
the story with Kerno?
No, well, Kerno. I mean, Kerno is not really a startup, right? It's something I did while I was working, while doing StudyBud, right? But it's basically a project that I started building out, and well, that I perhaps might take over in the future. Which it's kind of started because we were having this problem at StudyBud, where we basically for a marketplace doing accounting and transactions is relatively complex because you have you need to kind of manage properly the relationship between a contractor, and the platform, and then external costs coming in. So the accounting can become kind of messy, and I was kind of frustrated with the accounting solutions that I had found until that point. And I thought to myself, well, but what is actually accounting, right? And of course, I'd done some accounting courses in school, which proved then useful, of course, in building such a product. And I realized that actually a lot of it, especially with the recent things that you can do with machine learning libraries and with AI, of course, you can automate it a lot. Actually, you can automate it to a high degree. And so basically, I started building a product around that. And actually, I built first, even before that, I even built an incorporation product to kind of test it out and see what customers think about. We just basically started a couple of pilots, and it proved pretty well. Actually, we got a couple of pilots, and customers were relatively satisfied. We basically kind of made the whole incorporation process a bit faster. And I also started a couple of tests with the accounting product, and yeah, it's still in development. It's kind of on the side right now, but I might take it over again in the future. Yeah.
And I guess in the two startup stories that you have mentioned, it's all about, I think, having some people, customers who are interested in these. So how do you go about maintaining these relationship with customer? How do you go about building and finding the need that happened, which led to you to these startups?
Well, I think that there is no science around it. I don't think there's no exact formula for one startup, right? I think there's a couple of frameworks to think about this. First one is probably actually having a need yourself. So, for me, it started as a need, and actually, even my previous startup started as a need. So, I'm really onto this main framework of having a need and then thinking about a product, right? And then talking to customers and understanding if it's only a problem I have or others or other people have too, because there's also that risk, right? That you build something that you only need, and nobody else actually needs, right? So that's kind of a risk with this framework. Another framework that I've seen, of course, is being exposed to an environment, right? So, for example, working a job at a big corporate or at a big enterprise, and looking at, well, this operation seems pretty slow. Perhaps there's something we can do about this, right? And I've seen that happening quite a lot of times, and that there's many stories of this. I think there was a similar story with Dropbox, when I think the founders worked at some company, and then they saw that file sharing was not really streamlined as a thing. So yeah, all in all, I think there's no, let's say, definite way you can go about it, kind of finding these ideas. I would say start if you don't have a direct idea of a need that you have, because perhaps you don't have tech problems, right? Not everybody has these problems. I would say try to expose yourself to some environment. Be around different friends, be around people who are working in different industries. If you can, ask them to look at them working, right? So, if you have a friend who's working remotely at a bank or I don't know, any job, just ask to sit next to them, look what they're doing, right? Look if they're doing anything which you think could be automated, right? I mean, within the means of confidentiality, right? So, of course, you cannot really always speak into somebody else's computer, but within the means, I think it's a great framework for finding new ideas, and then well, customers is itself also a whole other topic that we could talk about for hours. I would say the general thing is try to find the channels which are best for your audience, right? So at StackSync, for example, we do a lot of insightful blogs, right, where we talk about technical problems, right? For example, with syncing different products, different enterprise grade applications. So and this is super interesting for our audience, and they get a lot of value from that, and we get a value of visibility, and then perhaps closing a deal.
So, and this brought me to thinking about the Dropbox example. So currently startups, I mean, 70%, 60% of the startups, they're leveraging AI to automate the boring tasks or very specific tasks for companies. And this usually requires, the founder or co-founder to have worked in a certain niche industry and then realize the problem, just like the Dropbox example. Is there any specific niche industry that you're currently interested in?
Oh, well, I'm not gonna tell, otherwise somebody's gonna go in it, right?
That's
No,
true.
but I think well, there's 90 actually. It's really, I mean, think about everything government, right? So, a lot of government work is just office work where you take information from a system, you copy paste it into another system, right? So, that's very easily automatable with LLMs, right? And everything which goes into administration. I saw a lot about hiring, HR, accounting, which is one of the reasons I was interested in it myself. Um, Everything which has to do also with vision models. I think vision models are seeing a very strong uptake in that sense. I saw recently at a hackathon somebody built something with vision models that would basically kind of replace, basically it would be kind of a surveillance camera, but with the possibility to infer right what's happening on the screen and actually send you alerts, right? And I think that's a great application of vision models, for example, right? So it's kind of, you can kind of build pretty much everything nowadays, and actually that's why I think right now it's probably one of the best times to build stuff, become a founder, or work at a startup.
So working at a startup, that's a good segue into the third startup that you're involved in. So can
Yes.
you take us through the journey? Like, how did you first
Sure.
even discover this company and what
Well,
got you interested?
I got to know the founder, Ruben, at an entrepreneur gathering. I think I don't remember now. It was a little while ago. And then we met again. I think in a co-working space. And I was working, I think, on Kerno at that point. And we started chatting, and he told me he was looking for founding engineers, and then, well, one thing leads to another, and eventually he offered me to join StackSync, and of course, I mean, I was extremely happy. StackSync is an incredible company. For those who don't know, so StackSync basically allows enterprise customers to ship data pipelines, which means that you can, for example, sync any enterprise application such as a CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, and any of these big applications with any other application, whether that is, another CRM, a database, a data warehouse, and now we're also building a new product for which I was taken, which is workflows. So you probably have heard about Zapier. We're building something like that, but actually much more powerful and for enterprise customers. So that is my main focus at StackSync. And what we're allowed to do with workflows is that you can basically create almost entire applications on it, just with like a visual interface where you drag and drop modules. You can connect them between them, make integrations with other applications, and kind of like automate like huge pipelines, which would take before like a lot of engineering hours and money, and make it really scalable, and really secure too. Yeah.
And so doing that, you're moving to San Francisco, is that correct?
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I just finished of course, my degree last week, so I'm still here in Lausanne, Switzerland. But yeah, in about 3 weeks, I'm departing for San Francisco. Yeah.
Wow, exciting. And do you have any kind of goals or things that you're setting for yourself once you get there in the
Yeah,
next
for
few
sure.
months?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to bring forward the product at StackSync. I think we have a lot to do, and there's really a lot of exciting things coming into the product. We're also growing our integrations, and because basically, StackSync also works a lot with integrations with external software. So we're now also launching a program where we can get basically anybody who are kind of wants to contribute, helps, and perhaps have the opportunity to actually join us later on to actually contribute to some of our code with external integration, such as connectors, and there I'm actually like directly coaching these people. So this is great because we get a lot of new talent and a lot of great minds together, and the product is moving forward really well. So I'm actually really excited. I think there's big things coming forward in the next months at StackSync.
Were you able to find an apartment in San Francisco? That's
Well,
the biggest challenge, right?
well,
Not
that's a
just finding
challenge,
money.
right? So that's not always easy. Yes, well, right now I'm staying temporarily first, and yeah, I'm fortunate that StackSync is helping me with that. So yeah, we will find a way for that. Exactly.
Cool.
Then I
And
guess we can move
yeah,
into.
go ahead.
Oh, do you still have a question?
No, no, I don't. Good.
Okay, then perhaps we can move into the last part. But I guess from your story, I think one major takeaway for myself is, we always talk about networking, grinding lead code, to get a job or to become successful software engineer. But sometimes I feel like it's really about, at least from your story, is passion will really bring you to, you know, higher places naturally. And let's say networking, your passion will actually provide quite a high value to a lot of people that you have met along the way. So, yeah, I think that's really inspiring, and yeah, I'll keep that in mind
That's great. I mean,
when I
it's
grind for
great.
something. Yeah. So for the last part, we are going to talk about. Um, we're going to dive deeper into things about you, and perhaps you could provide some advice
Sure.
for our audience as well. And I guess the first question is, what does a day in the life look like for you?
Oh, well, that's a good question. So, I mean, nothing too crazy, right? I mean, I wake up around, I think, 8 or 7, depending on the days. I start working around 9 or 10 after breakfast. We usually probably I usually split the day in usually doing a bit of software design. So, basically like looking at the architecture, especially when we're designing some new feature, right? So usually that involves making a lot of diagrams, and writing a lot of documentation for what's to come. So we really kind of take kind of this structured approach where we kind of look first at the design of the feature, what's going to be the implementation on the part of the backend, right, and in the infrastructure as a whole. After that, I also look a little bit about the user interface, user experience. So you do a couple of Figma mockups usually for features, and then well, around midday currently, because I'm in Europe, we have our daily stand-up, which is for the guys in San Francisco very early in the morning. We have a stand-up where we share what we're doing, where we're at, what's the next progress. And then in the second part of the day, I really do fully coding, usually until 9, 10, 11, midnight. Yesterday I was up till 2 a.m. So, it's really startup life, quite variable, and we're really pushing a lot of stuff right now. And then the next day I usually also review what we pushed yesterday, checking, that's the code is correct and everything, and, that way we can push for production. And then and sometimes I also talk a little bit to customers directly, to kind of show, well, we release this new feature. What do you think about it? What's the feedback? And, is there something we can improve there? So this is kind of a day. Right now, I'm not doing too much sports, unfortunately. That's something that has to change very soon. Now that I graduated, I actually have more time for that, so I will probably go back to the gym, or do a little bit of sport. Getting a bit out, also, I guess, is important to keep your sanity. And while I was doing my studies, that was not really the priority. Given my company, and doing exams, and managing all this, you kind of become a little bit unhealthy. But yeah, I think that's, long term, you can do it for a while, but you kind of have to trail back at one point.
And how do you stay energized when there's no sports?
Well, good question. I think sometimes I get really in this kind of focus space, where I want to build this new thing, and I'm just so excited to get it out that there's pretty much nothing that can stop me at that point. But yeah, I mean, every once in a while taking a break. Also, every once in a while, then I go see my girlfriend. We do something together. Taking your brain off code every once in a while is good, right? or reading also something that is non-code, right? Every once in a while, watching a film, or reading a book which is not technical, right? Or not reading some technical papers every once in a while. I think is good. Yeah.
Cool. Then I'm curious about, sorry, a bit back to the stacks thing, but
Yeah,
you
sure. Yeah,
mentioned
of
that
course.
you talk to customers now also, but
Hmm.
those customers are more technical in this case, right? Like since you're
Hmm.
working with data
Yeah.
pipeline,
Yeah, for
do
sure.
you see a difference in the way to communicate with them and how? Yeah, I'm very curious about this.
Well, for sure. I mean, we have a lot of different stakeholders, right? There's of course the we might sometimes communicate with a manager, right, which is less technical, and then often once we sign a contract with a client, we usually get in touch always with their tech team, right? It's pretty good talking with other technical teams because they care a lot about the product and they give us really on point feedback. So that's really great, and they're also very fast at giving it to us. We have them basically all on Slack, and they answer often within minutes. So this is great for product development. And they're very straight. Also, sometimes with certain clients you have to they're trying in a good manner to be nice to you, and to not necessarily tell you all of the wrong things about the product, right? What I see rather with technical people is that they're actually extremely straight with you, and they tell you things how they are, and that's extremely refreshing, to be honest, because you don't need to do a lot of work to try and get out a real answer. And our customers are honestly amazing. I mean, they give us great feedback, and so I think that's really cool.
Cool. And how does it feel now working as a founding engineer versus being the founder, setting the vision? How do you observe yourself in these two different thinking
Well, I
tracks,
think
I guess?
Well, I think that's the fact that I was before a founder was exactly one of the reasons I was hired to do this, right? Where in founding engineer, you're very close to the founders, and you're basically taking a big ownership and big responsibility in what's going to be basically the product going forward. For which reason I actually like it a lot. I mean, I like a lot taking leadership roles, responsibility. I was doing that already back in high school. Did that with my startup when I was managing 7, 8 people at one point. And now at StackSync we're looking also to hire more engineers. So I actually love taking on leadership roles, and I think it suits me quite well. And yeah, and that's a lot of what you're doing actually as a founding engineer, especially on such a technical product where you have to do really choices, thinking about the future and how the product is going to change, and kind of make it strong and generic enough such that in the future when somebody else picks it up is like, you've built a great foundation.
Can you give us some advice on how to get customer feedback and also maintaining, the balance of not annoying them and being, close with them?
Well, I think, the premise here is that, of course, when you do this, you have you're reasonably, well spoken. You have a somewhat of a, at least something basic that solves their needs, right? Because if you try and do an MVP, which has nothing, right? It seems and solves no, is not viable in any sense. Then I think it doesn't help much. I think doing customer interviews is something that is often suggested, and I think it can be useful to discover some things, but to get really the deep feedback, I think what's really great is, just developing a small MVP, even something with Figma, right? It doesn't necessarily not even need to be coded, showing it to a customer and seeing them interact with it, right? This is great. This is great. You see, and there's no filter here, right? Because they have to use it in that moment. So it's kind of a test that they're doing. And you see that if they don't know that then you failed, right? And it's amazing because it's extremely instant. There is no way that they can filter that, right? And now about the part of annoying, well, I think doing hammering is good, and in the startups often you need to do that because you need to create noise as a small player. And so you often need to maybe call the same client 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Of course, you need to try and be polite, and if they tell you to just back off, then of course that's what you gotta do. But being persistent and being really not backing down at the first negative feedback, I think is good. And then okay, so you told me you really didn't like my product last time. Okay, well, look at this, right? We've taken everything you said, and here is even a customized version with your logo on it, right? And often they love that, especially when you come back to them and you've reflected on what they said, and it really makes them think, oh, look at this. This person spent time for me, and they really made an effort, and now the product is actually really suited for me. This is great. Now I want to sign a contract, right? And then you close. I think that's a great way of thinking about it.
And how much time are you spending on each customer?
Well, I'm not. I'm really more
Or
on
the
the
team?
engineering side. I'm not able to answer that extremely well. I kind of deal with customers more on the part of engineering, right? So try and get feedback for products and stuff like that. So I might not be the best one to answer this question. Well, it's extremely variable, right? Every customer is kind of different. Some bigger customers might require more time, especially if you have to do certain compliance checks, right? So those take a little bit of time. Due diligence, although actually at StackSync we've passed actually a lot of certifications, so this makes the process pretty faster. So yeah, that helps. But yeah, different companies, different requirements. Yeah, so I would not be really able to give an accurate number on this, but yeah.
What is the best piece of advice you ever received in your life?
Don't think within the constraints, right? So oftentimes we tend to think about ideas and building products because they have been always built in a certain way. And and this happened to me too a couple of times, where I've built, I was building something, and I was somewhat referencing to a standard which was there in the industry, and I actually didn't think about the fact that, the fact that this standard exists does not mean that it is the right one, right? And I think we often see that, and it's a very dangerous thing because you can limit yourself a lot in the possibilities. And I was thinking just about that the other day when I was busy designing a schema for an internal feature, and then I thought to myself, well, but this doesn't make sense, right? This is just something that was designed previously, and now we've got to do something different. And then actually I thought to myself, well, what would be actually amazing to have, right? And this framework actually, I think, because people who are founders and want to build some innovation, they've often got it in their head what is great, right? But often we tend to, let that sink in, not actually, come out when it's the moment of creating the product, because we're so fixated on something that already exists in the industry. So really build something new, something that is not within the constraints. That's my piece of advice. And always also ask for help. Always ask for more. Right. This is also a great piece of advice I got. So, just if you want to become an expert on any certain field, start looking on LinkedIn. Right. LinkedIn, you can find basically any person on earth who is expert on any given topic. You just go to them, you message them and say, hey, I'd love to offer you lunch if you give me an hour of your time and we can discuss this topic. And you'd be surprised how much people are willing to help and how far that can get you.
Wow, I think that's a that's a really good advice. People usually just say, "Oh yeah, you have to work really hard," but honestly, like
I mean,
I think beyond
that too,
those,
right? But
yeah, but being able to not censor yourself, I think that's really, at least for me, I feel it's like a more refreshing advice than the ones that we already know and we should be doing. But people often just throw this to us to say, okay, yeah, just to tell us to go away.
yeah,
But yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that happens too. That happens too.
yeah. Okay, well, I have no further question. I really learned a lot from you, Oliver, and I really wish the best of luck for you in San Francisco.
Voilà.